I wonder if anyone wants to ask a question. That is, how much money can a person make in their lifetime? John D. Rockefeller is the world champion and is known as the person in history who has made the most money in their lifetime. Today, let us talk about him, and I will tell you how much money he indeed had. In previous videos, I talked about the Rothschild family because the low profile they kept, we do not hear of them that much. When it comes to John D. Rockefeller, many people know that he was a great entrepreneur in the last century and a generation of tycoons and the world's richest man. But many people don't know what John D. Rockefeller did. You are probably aware that every Christmas, the lighting ceremony of the Christmas tree will be held at the Rockefeller Center in New York, USA, and many celebrities will participate. The Rockefeller Center was originally built by the Rockefeller family, and it is also their property and a symbol of the Rockefeller family's wealth. It is now the world's largest private building group, consisting of 19 skyscrapers. The central area of Manhattan between 48th and 51st Streets and 5th and 7th Avenues is home to a collection of office buildings, churches, art museums, gardens, squares, banks, and shopping centers, making it a city within a city. Without the building, the name of John D. Rockefeller, the most renowned member of the Rockefeller family, may have been forgotten. However, the Rockefeller Group is only one of the many business ventures owned by the family, who also have interests in finance, insurance, the automotive industry, military industry, and government. The Rockefeller family also funded the construction of many famous buildings in America, such as the United Nations headquarters. The money for all of this was earned by the first generation of the Rockefeller family, John D. Rockefeller, who was a successful industrialist and philanthropist. Subsequent generations of the family have lived off of this fortune, rather than being responsible for making more money, but could continue to be one of the world's top families just by living off of the fortune. John D. Rockefeller, the first generation, was born in 1839 in a small town in New York State called Richest, which now has about 1,000 people. His background is somewhat complicated, as there was a dispute between France and Germany over whether he was of French or German descent. However, according to Rockefeller himself, he considered himself simply an American, regardless of his ancestry. His father, William Rockefeller, was a dishonest man who made a living through various illegal activities, such as selling fake medicine, stealing, and lending money to farmers at exorbitant interest rates, then taking their land if they couldn't pay. He particularly liked to flirt and have improper relationships with many women. After marrying Rockefeller's mother, he would occasionally bring home children, all of whom were born from his relationships with other women. He had lived near the border of the United States and Canada and used the excuse of doing business to deceive a 19-year-old girl in Canada, committing bigamy. It is said that William had wives and children in various places. Due to his illegal activities, William was often on the run from the police and rarely stayed with his family. John's childhood was therefore chaotic and difficult, due to his father's poor moral character and frequent absences. John Rockefeller, the eldest son in his family, took on the responsibility of supporting his family at a young age due to his father's inability to do so. He began working and earning money at a young age and was extremely frugal with his money. As he grew older, he studied accounting in business school. However, upon graduation, he struggled to find a job due to the economic recession in the United States. Eventually, he found a job as an accountant at a wholesale agricultural company at the age of 16. For the next 3 years, he primarily handled bookkeeping. At 19, he and a classmate from business school, named Clark, used the money he had saved over the years to open their own wholesale agricultural store. Clark, who was 10 years older than John, was the main leader of the business. In 1859, the first oil well in the world was drilled in Pennsylvania, USA, which marked the start of the modern oil industry in the United States. At that time, John D. Rockefeller had no connection to oil. However, after the oil well was drilled, oil began to flow out of the ground, and people began to use oil lamps and stoves instead of burning wood and wax. After the first oil well appeared, American businessmen and people went to dig for oil wells because oil was very valuable. John D. Rockefeller also saw this as a great opportunity, so he specifically went to Pennsylvania for 12 days to inspect oil wells, read local news, and talk to local people. Then he decided not to invest. His partner, Clark, kept asking him every day why he was not investing, but Rockefeller explained to him 3 reasons. First, the investment was too hot now, and the cost will eventually fall. Second, the threshold for this was too low. Everyone can enter this field. Third, the current oil consumption market had no sign of an outbreak, so the price of oil would definitely fall in the future. Soon after, the price of oil quickly fell from $1.30 per gallon to 13 cents per gallon, which was a disaster. Because the oil wells had already been built, the merchants who had originally invested had to desperately mine in order to make up for their losses. The more they mined, the more the price dropped. In 1961, the North-South War broke out and the demand for oil increased dramatically. John recognized this opportunity, but he still did not plan to invest in oil wells. Although drilling for oil was not profitable, refining oil was. So in 1963, he and Clark invested in a refinery together. They also brought on a chemist named Semir Andrews to join the venture. Andrews was in charge of production, Clark was responsible for bringing in crude oil, and John was in charge of sales and procurement. The company initially operated well, but soon fierce competition began, with everyone constantly lowering prices. At this point, their company struggled because their crude oil prices were higher than other companies. But Clark didn't see this as a problem, believing that good things should be sold at a high price. However, John believed that the only way to survive in the market was to have prices lower than others. In 1865, Clark and Rockefeller went their separate ways due to differing ideologies. Rockefeller borrowed money to purchase all of Clark's shares, becoming the majority shareholder and renaming the company Rockefeller and Andrews. This also happened to be the year that the American Civil War ended. With the completion of the war, many new railways and infrastructure were built, requiring transportation, and oil as a new form of fuel was beginning to see increased demand. Rockefeller saw an opportunity in the oil industry and began to expand his refinery by constantly taking loan. In 1868, he invested all his assets into purchasing the largest oil refinery in the area, which could produce 500 barrels of kerosene per day, making it the largest refinery in the world at the time. He named it Standard Oil, and the company would later become one of the greatest in the world. Rockefeller aimed to not only make Standard Oil a technically advanced refinery, but also to establish it as the standard in the oil industry. Think about it. The automobile decade began in the early 20th century. The Ford Motor Company was founded in 1903, and Rockefeller was ready for this great decade as early as the late 19th century by preparing its energy foundation. If he cannot be rich, who else can? Although it was already the largest oil company in the United States at the time, it only accounted for 10% of the market, with the remaining 90% being countless small companies. Most people would be satisfied to get to this point, but John's next amazing action would take his wealth to another level. Now, Rockefeller's company operates the largest and best refinery in the United States, with very strong competitiveness. Other peers also operate a refinery, but they cannot compete with Rockefeller. So John Rockefeller negotiated with them, asking them to give up a portion of their shares, which John would then acquire those. The peer would still hold a portion of the shares, and they would jointly operate the company. The management rights were in John's hands, and it was mutually beneficial. John controlled more companies at a very low cost, while the peers held shares and made money while doing nothing under John's strong management. So later on, Rockefeller almost controlled all the refining industry in the United States, probably reaching 95%. You may think this is a monopoly. You are right. This is a monopoly. The antitrust law was designed for Rockefeller specifically in 1890 because the government was concerned about him. Later, after the automobile revolution and the First World War, Rockefeller's wealth skyrocketed. Next, let's uncover how much money he had in his lifetime. In 1937, when Rockefeller passed away, his documented inheritance was $1.5 billion. However, it is not the same as $1.5 billion today. At that time, $1.5 billion accounted for 2% of the total wealth in American society. If that proportion were applied today, it would be equivalent to nearly $400 billion, equivalent to tripled Elon Musk's. Some people say that this doesn't seem like a lot of money, but let me tell you one more thing. He had a principle throughout his life that he never broke. For every dollar he earned, he donated 1/3, saved 1/3, and spent 1/3 on himself. So you can imagine how much money he earned in his lifetime. If you like this success story, please subscribe, smash a like, and make sure to turn on the notification so you won't miss when I update. I will see you in the next video.